Hi everybody and welcome back to Exotics of the World TV. Are you guys looking to set up your own bioactive enclosure and don't really know how to, or you guys haven't got the greenest of thumbs? Then this video is for you. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through of the 5 most easiest species of plants to keep alive in your enclosure. These plants are going to be super hardy, they're super fast growing, and it's going to take a lot for you to kill them. These plants on our list not only look really effective and amazing inside these enclosures, but they're going to help out with humidity regulation, and they're also going to provide some really cool natural hiding spots for your animals. Anyway, that's enough from me. Let's jump into the video, and as always, please sit back, relax, and enjoy the content. So starting off our list is probably everybody's well-known plant. It is pothos or pathos, whichever way, also commonly known as devil's ivy. Now, personally to me, I've been working with this species of plant for a very long time and I cannot stand it. But that's a personal preference to me. It's typically like the standard like global green that everyone has in their enclosures and stuff. Honestly, I don't like it. There are cool different species out there, but pothos or devil's ivy in general is really good, especially if you're just starting out. This plant is literally impossible to kill, so for those of you that do not have the greenest of thumbs, this one is definitely high up on your list. So why would you choose pothos? So pothos or devil's ivy, it tolerates really high humidity. In fact, it absolutely thrives in high humidity environments. So if you're doing a crested gecko enclosure or a chameleon enclosure, like those types of species, then it's going to do really well. It also does well in really low light situations, and it does really well in areas with abundance of light. So if you don't have enough money to splash out on those fairly expensive reptile LEDs and you want something to look like fairly good in there, then definitely I would 100% recommend pothos. So in terms of placement, you can literally put pothos anywhere in your enclosure. It is literally the master of its environment. It can trail, it can climb, it can be left on the ground, so for like ground coverage and stuff like that. It is also a super fast grower. So if you've got a fairly large enclosure and you're looking to fill that empty space, this is definitely going to be a winner for your enclosure. So if you're going to have this like plant kind of like trailing to create like a really nice kind of like jungly effect with all like the root system and stuff coming down that will just like naturally protrude out, you can attach it to like branches and near enough anything. So if you want to, you can attach it using garden twine or fishing wire. The same can be said if you want it trailing like up the back and create kind of like a background kind of plant with this. But again, just make sure that you are on top of the trimming because it does grow exponentially fast. Or if you're not really bothered about attaching it to either the background or having it on branches and stuff like trailing down, you can literally just plant it straight into the soil. Now again, as I've mentioned and as I'm going to keep mentioning, just make sure that you keep this bush trimmed back. This thing is literally like a triffid. So how are you actually going to care for your pothos? So I've had this plant in multiple different enclosures. I've had it with invertebrates, I've had it with reptiles, I've even had it with some exotic mammals. So it does really well in most environments, but the ideal way to like care for it where it's going to grow super crazy is have it on a humidity between 50 to 90% or so. Keep it fairly watered, but make sure that it doesn't become waterlogged or anything like that, and make sure it has plenty of light. As I've said previously, this plant is ideal for most species of animal. So I've had it with crested geckos, I've had it with lychee geckos, I've had it with African pygmy dormice, I've had it with all sorts of different frog species, so from dart frogs all the way up to like arboreal tree frogs like Borneo phyllids or white tree frogs. It's literally so versatile. Moving on to one of my favorite background creeping plants. This is Ficus pumila, also known as creeping fig. So why are we going to choose Ficus pumila? Very similar to the pothos, it grows extremely quickly under like really good like light conditions. It can tolerate quite a lot, even if it looks quite crispy. If you've like not watered it for a bit, it jumps straight back. As well, if you're looking for kind of like a aged kind of vivarium, kind of like a lost temple type thing, this is really good because it's going to mimic those kind of like overgrown vines and stuff like that. And just like with the pothos, this is going to create really good hiding spots. Now, because the leaves don't get as large and even the stems don't get as large either as like the pothos does, it's going to create micro habitats and stuff for all sorts of things that are going to be living inside your enclosure. So if you've got like wood lice or springtails, it's going to create really nice refuges for them. Now, Ficus familiar can come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. So the typical ones that we see in the hobby are the variegated variety and just the standard green. Now, where are we going to place this inside of our enclosure? So you can kind of have this plant growing like along the floor to give you some nice floor coverage, or if you wanted to, you could pop it like at the base of your background and train it to grow all the way up. If you wanted to do really, really well, I would always recommend placing it near a water source. The reason why I recommend this is because the plants will send out roots and stuff, like kind of like under the water bowl. So if you're changing your water bowl quite regularly, you're going to spill some and it's going to get some of that extra water. And also it looks pretty cool, like when it grows round like water dishes and stuff. You can just take the water dish out and you've got like a nice little circular hole where your water dish is. So you can just take it out and pop it in and out and stuff. It's really, really cool. I really, really like this plant, unlike the pothos. So how are we going to care for this plant? Again, this is a very high humidity tolerating species. So anywhere from around about 50 to 90% humidity is absolutely bob on. So these guys don't really tolerate no light or low light. The lowest light level we would say would be kind of like a medium light level, but they will also really tolerate direct and indirect bright white light. Ensure as well that the substrate around where your Ficus familiar is, make sure that it is quite moist, not waterlogged or anything like that, because eventually the roots could rot and it could obviously kill the plant itself. And again, just like with the pothos, just make sure that it is trimmed quite regularly. Now, it's not going to grow at an exponential rate like the pothos will, but it's still a fairly fast-growing species. I really like to use this species with things like dart frogs, things that aren't going to have really ginormous kind of plants and stuff in there. Because they've only got small little leaves, if you have something that's quite large in there, like plant-wise, it'll just detract from it, really. But you can still have it in larger enclosures. It's completely up to you. And moving on to number 3 is the Maranta, or the prayer plant. Now, this plant is super, super common everywhere. So you'll be able to pick it up from most reptile stores that do live plants and stuff like that. But you'll also be able to pick it up from specific plant stores and potentially even supermarkets. If you do go for the ones that are from like supermarkets and plant stores and stuff, make sure that you ask, okay, has the substrate and stuff been treated? If it has, take it out, batter it out and plant it in some new substrate. Now, I love using this as kind of like a background kind of plant. It's got really nice wide leaves on it. It can also flower. Now, the flowers that I've had from the different Marantas that I've had in the past, they can range anywhere from like kind of like purples, pinks to whites. And as well, the pattern on the leaves, I think it just brings a little bit of different kind of color other than just green into your enclosure. Again, it is a very hardy species, so it's going to take a lot for you to try and kill it. Now, where are you going to place this? I would always place this plant kind of in a background. So it's going to do really, really well just to try and fill out those like gaps in your enclosure. Now, this plant absolutely loves indirect light, which is perfect. Now, how are we going to care for our prayer plant? Now, if you wanted it to do really, really well and get those really nice big luscious leaves and stuff, again, maintain the humidity anywhere between 60 to 90%, which in these kind of like bioactives, it's going to be fairly easy for you to do that. In terms of light as well, these guys do like a little bit of shade, so we will call it filtered shade. So you don't want to place it directly underneath a lamp because it's just going to start crying and then potentially frazzle or not do as well. Now, for the watering of this plant, just maintain like a standard moistness. Gross. Just maintain a kind of like dampness. No, that's even worse. Just make sure that the soil is a little bit wet. Not soggy, not waterlogged, just a little bit wet. And this plant is going to absolutely thrive. I've used Maranta in quite a lot of wide variety of different setups with different animals, but the ones I really like to use them with are kind of like little micro geckos and small day geckos and stuff like that. Because I think that it really picks out the color of the animal as well. So if you've got something like a morning gecko on there, kind of like a browny kind of speckly kind of shiny color, it's really going to stand out. So not only does it look nice in the enclosure, but it's also going to help you identify and spot the animals that are already living in there. I don't think this would be a decent kind of plant list if I didn't mention this one next, which is a nidularium, also known as the fireball bromeliad. Now, what's really cool about most bromeliads, especially this one, is that they are epiphytic, which means that they can grow on surfaces and they don't necessarily need to have like a substrate base there. Now, if you want to grow things kind of like epiphytically, all you'll need to do if you want to like attach it to like a branch or anything like that is get it in place where you want to, and you can use like garden twine or even like fishing wire just to keep it in place. Or if you want to, you can place it on the back of the enclosure. You can do that by using kind of like, you know, those like garden hooks that you like pin stuff in. Those types of hooks, absolutely fine to use. If you do plan on having it kind of like epiphytically and you using the twine and stuff like that, once you've like twined it in place, just make sure that you pack around the roots and stuff with moss and keep the moss nice and damp. This is so that the roots don't get kind of like crispy, and it's going to aid in the growth of your bromeliad. Now, if you really want that super cool kind of like jungle effect look, then I would definitely recommend adding one of these plants to your enclosure. So how are we going to care for our bromeliads? So these guys are really, really dependent on humidity. We wouldn't really recommend dropping the humidity inside the enclosure anywhere past 70. So 70 to 90 to 100% humidity is absolutely going to be fine for this species. It is a fairly hardy species, so if your humidity does drop below that, it's not going to like frizzle and die. It's just not going to grow as well. Now with these guys, these like really bright light. So the more bright light you can pump in there, the better for them, so they can photosynthesize. And moving on to watering. Now, one of the favorite parts of bromeliads that I absolutely love is obviously that the little cup inside where like a lot of dart frogs and stuff will go, have babies, chill out in, all those kind of things. So just make sure that at least like once or maybe even twice a day, depending on where you are, if your water's evaporating really quickly, just make sure that it's topped up. So always keep a little bit of water in the center of your bromeliad. Like I've just mentioned as well, these plants are really good for species like dart frogs, frogs in general, tiny geckos, so day geckos, morning geckos, those kinds of species. And moving on to number 5. This is a true tough survivor. So this is the spider plant. Now, just like with the pothos, if you leave this unchecked, it will grow absolutely crazy in your enclosure. However, fret not. If you have other species, which most people typically do, so things like a tortoise or maybe a bearded dragon, you can feed those excesses to your beardy or tortoise. In fact, most omnivorous / herbivorous species will be able to have a little bit of spider plant within their diet. So don't worry that you're just chopping it back and you're like, oh my god, I've got all these leaves, what am I going to do with it? Feed it to your tortoise. Or if you want to, you can chop the babies off, grow them on, and sell them to your friends. It's completely up to you. Now, why are we going to choose the spider plant? So spider plant is really good for its kind of like really nice green leaves with that white center. So again, it's going to be able to pick out quite a lot of reptiles. So you'll be able to notice if they're like jumping on them and stuff like that. Also, they're quite bushy, so they're going to provide a really nice bit of coverage for your animal. Now, where are you going to place it inside the enclosure? This is completely up to you. It'll do fine anywhere. It does okay in low light situations. It does really well in bright light. It does far better in bright light. Now, in terms of humidity, these guys love humidity, but they'll still stay alive if it drops to around about 50, so we would recommend anywhere between 50 to 90% humidity, like with most of the things on this list, and you'll be absolutely fine. If you can keep it up more to like the 80-90 percentile, then this plant is going to absolutely thrive in your enclosure. Now, in terms of like watering, you're going to want to keep it kind of like a little bit wet. I'm not using those words again. A little bit wet, not too like waterlogged or anything like that, because the plant's not going to do very well. If you are noticing that in your enclosure it is drying out and your plant is looking a little bit tired, what you can easily do is pick it up, pop it in your bathroom, and literally probably within about 48 hours or so, because of the high humidity in there, it's going to bounce right back. And there you have it. Those were the 5 best plants that I would recommend for a tropical kind of enclosure. So thank you guys very much for watching. Do you use any of those plants that I've kind of like mentioned? If you do, pop it in the comment section down below. Let us know what you're keeping. Let us know what plans you're having there also. Don't forget as well to give us a like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell icon, and you'll be notified when we release new videos. But anyway, that's been enough from me. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. See you later.